I guess this is the review portion of the last of the games in the Art of Siege quad. You know, strangely, I talked about sort of the value of the whole quad in Lille. I just felt like chatting about it. I'll probably touch on it a little bit more here. But this one in particular has always pleased me the most out of the set. Including even Siege of Constantinople, which was good enough to convince me to buy this sucker at $60 at a time in my life when I was pretty damn poor. When the idea of putting out that kind of money for a game was extreme. It definitely took some serious thought. Did I want it that badly? Whatever. The box was the selling point for me. These soap boxes are just awesome in appearance. They're not sturdy like a GMT box by any means. The other components, well, I got mixed views on the map. The extreme colors kind of take away from some of the pleasure of it, but it actually is more functional than the Lille map, primarily because there's less of these silly little dots. And overall, that's just part of a design decision on this one, and I think the two were designed together essentially. This is such a weird quad because they don't share the same roles. But Acre and Tyre have a lot of the same rules cut and pasted into place, and Sev and Lille have a lot of the same rules cut and pasted. There are some little gotchas in there where somebody went in and changed, a line out of the cut and paste just to make it really hard to learn the series as well. But in particular, Lille and Sev are very, very different concepts. So they're kind of harder to approach without that hex grid. But then there's this huge mechanical difficulty of lining up these damn little parallels. I mean, that's what makes this game so cool. And then when you actually have to measure out your firing, okay, that's kind of annoying, but also measuring the movement, especially if you're holding a camera at the same time, that's kind of obnoxious. It doesn't help that there's, okay, maybe not a lot of errata. And honestly, that's more not a sign that these are, well-handled games. More a sign that I think they were told they could have one sheet of errata between them. Because there seems to be a lot missing even from this errata, which came out significantly after the game. Maybe there's more elsewhere. Who knows? But all of the games could have had better rules sets, and in particular the Lille and Sev ones are hard to approach because they don't have a lot of stuff you can just skip over and say, yeah, I've seen that before. And that's just the hexes rules. Zone of control, okay, I gotta look for one line in that. How does it, okay, that's that kind, fine. Yet I still read it that way. Of course, I've played these before, so I think that I could do a better job with them. But I think every time I've played these two, I've screwed something or some things up pretty significantly. You see in my vids, I certainly did. I like the counters better for Sev. Less information on them. Not those stupid... less digits on them. So Lille has these silly strength point markers that, equate the number of men. Lille also has this annoying keeping track of the casualties is vital to determining who wins the game for the automatic victories, and that's a really obnoxious mechanical task that you just have to do it again and again. Sev doesn't have that. However, aligning these little parallels and making sure that you're in the right terrain and not bumping the map, and most particularly because of the range of movement in this one. remember if the scale is a little different. But in this sucker, you can't... No, I know what it is. It's the firing range in this one is taken from the center of the bastions. These little center spots. And in a tiny bastion like that, that doesn't mean too much. But in some of the larger bastions, it can add significant range to where you're firing to or from. It's also sometimes difficult to align your pieces so that they make it to the right jumping off spot. In a lot of cases, you're finding yourself with kind of these decisions that, in terms of the geometrics of the game, where you can place the parallels, etc., that make it just very difficult to do what you want to do. And when you think about it, you say to yourself, why can't the sap be a little shorter? Why do I have to build 3 full parallels here? Just a lot of little things like that that certainly you could make good arguments to go the other way. In terms of counter mix, I think they want it to go a certain way, but it just doesn't quite work out right. However, if you, I don't know, once you kind of get over that, and if you're willing to fudge around a little bit with that and bump things, yeah, that's not in the depression anymore. To play very, very loosely, and not to worry about the exact location of these things to an extreme extent, I think it works out so that it's fairly palatable. Also in Lil, you had this shifting of forces back and forth and something. In this one, you kind of have that. You have that with these supply areas, where you have to be keeping a certain number of troops in there, but it's largely the same number of troops. And they're not getting killed, so that you have to rebalance your forces everywhere regularly. So there's a lot less of that mechanical complexity in this one. And that's enough to push it to being my definite favorite. I definitely like it more than Lil, even though Lil is beautiful for that factor. And I think actually that Lil struggles with Acre and Siege of Constantinople. And Tyre's not that bad, actually. I used to think it was. With me, because it does go so far into some of these really obnoxious things. In fact, every game in this series, I would say, has a certain high mechanical cost when you actually get down to playing it. It's whether it's Tyre with dealing with the naval rules, or Acre, where you have this kind of weird simultaneous fire combat that can cause retreats that really mess with your head as you're trying to resolve the whole combat at the same time. And that's the one where you're coming from both sides. That's why it's an issue there. Or Lil, which in some ways is a nightmare with it. You know, the easy part is flipping all these little bastion counters and wall damage and everything in these games, and then flipping them back as the defender gets his turn and gets to recover the damage. This one actually abstracts that more. It's not a hex by hex or point by point wall damage. It's bastion by bastion. And that kind of makes sense. One significant breach in the bastion may be enough to weaken most of it. All right. Maybe not to the same degree that this shows it. But I feel like stepping away in that way makes this one a little easier. There are still some really annoying factors to it, though. Measuring out where your garrisons go each turn. It's a pain in the ass. I also think that this one may not be terribly balanced. It strikes me, at least under sort of good play, it strikes me, first of all, the defender never has too many options in any of these games. And unfortunately, in some ways, some of them have been made kind of less than solitaire accessible by having, you know, secret hidden mining and stuff like that. Where you have a game where one of the players isn't doing much, but the one thing he's doing makes it so that you can't play it solo. This one doesn't have that. This one doesn't have that at all. This one's perfectly solo playable. And so is Lil, which of course adds to their enticement in some ways. But again, the defender mainly is not making huge decisions, and some of the huge decisions they make are made at the very beginning of the game. Like, where am I going to put my big siege guns and my mortars? Because I never get to move them in this game, and that feels kind of funny. In fact, that feels really funny to me. It makes sense once a bastion falls that you'd lose the guns in it. It doesn't make anywhere near as much sense that you would not be able to somehow, over the course of half a month or a month, shift one of these big guns. They were moved into place there. They've got, you know, there are significant men around to move them. Someone would be able to do it. So that feels a little weird to me, although they may be emplaced more solidly, but then why do you get reinforcement guns? You should have some ability to move them. Maybe not without them being unfireable for 2 turns or something, so you would never actually do it. But there should be some ability. Just, I saw in the game I was playing where I really wanted to move a siege gun over to a certain area, and I don't have one anymore. The other big choice is really, you know, it's not like the Allies have that many huge choices either. They have more to do and more little choices that kind of mean something. But in the end, this is, and every game in the siege situation, is really kind of this mechanical endeavor. You're not sitting there, it's not like a no retreat or something where you're really, you know, matching wits with your enemy. But to tell you the truth, that's not why I'm into war games. I'm into war games to play them out and see what happens. And I'm there drumming, go see the video on it, and imagining, you know, the walls just slowly collapsing down the line during that final barrage that probably lasted for about a week, you know. As they start falling, knowing how much ammo, you know, you have left to take on the next section, so they're maybe staggering and hitting more than one section at once. But just imagining that whole thing. And also imagining what the walls themselves are created out of. So I guess there's old city walls here. I don't know for sure. And then what Tottlebind's doing is he's putting sandbags and earthenworks and shit like that in the way and really making it capable of withstanding the more modern siege weaponry that the city was not really designed for, you know. All right. So yeah, let's go to the value of the whole set. This thing sells for some ridiculous amount of money. At least that's the asking price that the buy it now type solutions come to. And I've seen it go for well over 100, probably around 200. And in a sense, you know, I mean, I can't tell you what's worth what, you know, right? I can compare it to other games. One of the problems is there really isn't much to compare this to. But if you're seriously considering it, make sure you get Siege of Constantinople. That gives you some feel, at least towards what Acre's going to be a little bit like. If you get the naval rules, it gives you some feel towards what Tyre's going to feel a little bit like. And it's a lot cheaper. On the other hand, it's worth keeping your eyes peeled for this sucker because, I mean, I bought mine for $60, but I bought it back in the 90s. From a store where he knew it was worth a good deal, but he couldn't move it. And he was my friend. He offered it to me for $60, and was a hard call for me at that point, but I was like, nah, I can't pass it up. I paid 50 for Terrible Swift Sword 10 years before that, almost, so it was worth it. But I've seen it go for around that price. In fact, when I first got involved in Board Game Geek, I saw it go for 60, and I was kind of like, oh, what the hell, this is like the most rare, prized, older game that I have. Little did I know, I looked back and saw Le Grand Gear going for $200. Things that had much higher print runs, like Advanced Third Reich, going for a good deal of money. Very surprising to me what the prices kind of filter down at. But this one, you're getting a one of a kind in a lot of ways, and that is something to realize. I saw the Siege of Malta. That may incorporate some of it, but there are so few Siege games out there anyhow. And this one may have kind of sealed some of their fate, because it tries real hard to make an interesting game out of it, and it's tough to do. It makes an interesting activity out of it for someone like me, but I don't think it makes this, I don't think it does anything for the competitive gamer except maybe the mind planning in Acre and Constantinople. Anyway, I've talked long and far about nothing, basically, which is probably what I usually do. So we'll send this one up.